Do you guys ever make New Year's resolutions that you're really dedicated to before realizing it's not worth it? If you said no, I'm sorry, but you're a liar. My resolution is to learn how to chill out. I'm not doing great on that front. Man, what a year 2024 was. It was a big year for me personally, as you probably know. I moved, I upgraded my streaming game quite a bit, and I made big steps in my life. But I also played a lot of great games. I played 19 games, both new and old, in 2024, and originally I was just going to talk about 10 of them. But the quality of the games I played was so great that I decided to extend it to 15 games. The one rule I have is the same as all previous years. I must have played and beaten the game within 2024. So with that said, it's time to reminisce. Let's roll! It's kind of funny I'm talking about this game first on this list, because this was actually the first game I played last year, and I'd say it was a great game to start the year off with. Trials of Mana. This game was recommended to me by my friend Bloodbolt Omega, and I had a great deal of fun with it. The premise is honestly really cool. There are 6 characters, and you choose one to be your main protagonist, and 2 more act as your supporting cast. What makes this really interesting is that these 6 characters are all widely different in their characterization and in their battle attributes. Each one is a different class and they all play differently. Sure, the story in and of itself is mostly the same for each and it's pretty standard retro RPG fare, but their own little arcs as well as their motivations really does add a lot to this simple narrative. The characters are really compelling and you want to see their arcs resolve. Moving on to the gameplay, it's also pretty simple but really fun. Battles are real-time, and you don't have a ton of options at the start, but as you progress and recruit the other characters you selected, your options grow and grow. Adding on to this is the reclass system. At a couple points during your adventure, you can reclass your party to upgrade their stats, but more importantly, it changes what skills they can learn. Each character has 2 options for their reclass points, so there's a fair amount of variety at play. The game is pretty short for an RPG, clocking in at roughly 15 hours, but that feels very deliberate. With how you can choose different characters to go through the story and the reclass system adding a ton of variety, you're actively encouraged to play through this game a bunch. While simple, this game is certainly a keeper. Go forth and conquer the trials ahead. Art can be expressed in many things. There's obviously drawings, of course, but there's also stuff like sculpting or even video making. Anyways, there's also the art of song, and that's where this next game comes in. I'm talking about Wandersong. This game takes the idea of music being art and just goes absolutely ham with it. At the start, a young bard gets a message that the world is going to end, so with nothing but their charisma and singing voice, they go out to learn the Earth Song to save the day. The story wastes absolutely no time getting going, but as it goes on, it shows that there's a ton of layers to it. After a certain point, a hero that's so blatantly cliche it's hilarious shows up and tries to usurp the spotlight to be the savior. This causes the bard to doubt themselves and wonder why they even set out on this journey. However, the somber nature of the narrative really adds a lot because it feels very relatable. When you suddenly see someone doing something much better than you, it's easy to lose your spark. Seeing the development of the bard and the other characters around them really brings the whole story together. Unfortunately, the gameplay doesn't slouch. It's a simple 2D adventure game with areas to traverse and puzzles to solve, and the main gimmick is singing. With the bard's singing voice, you can manipulate the environment, talk with others for information, or just straight up create miracles. It's honestly a really interesting and original way to allow you to affect the world around you, and the way each chapter tries to spice things up keeps it from getting stale. I'd say this game sings a beautiful melody throughout. You guys remember when Princess Peach was merely a damsel in distress? It's wild to think that for almost 2 decades, that was her lot in life, but I'm really glad she's gotten to be so much more in recent years. I'd say 3D World allowing her to be playable was the spark, and ever since then, it's been uphill for her, barring a few exceptions, of course. And in 2024, we reached the apex of that with a new game all about Peach. Princess Peach Showtime. This game immediately caught my attention when it was revealed, so I grabbed it on day 1. And yeah, it's pretty fun. The premise is that Princess Peach and the Toads find a flyer for a new theater and they decide to go check it out. All seems well, until this new villain named Grape and her Sour Bunch, I adore that name, hijacks the theater and boots everyone out. Peach somehow stays inside, and with the help of his new character Stella, tries to restore the theater and boo Grape off the stage. At the start, you just have Peach using Stella's ribbon to beat enemies and light things up. Nothing too special, but when you get to the sparks for each play, that's when things get good. There are 10 different playstyles in this game. Swordfire lets you slice through vines and enemies in your way, Ninja gives you stealth options, a cool dash, and a wall jump, Cowgirl lets you wheel a lasso and ride on a horse, Pastilleur lets you bake delicious treats, Dashing Thief, aka the best one, lets you use a grappling hook to zoom around to disable machines, Ice Skater allows you to put on beautiful performances, Detective lets you solve mysteries and uncover secrets, Mermaid lets you swim around and sing to influence fish, Mighty lets you just punch absolutely everything that dares stand in your way and lift massive objects, and Kung Fu gives you great agility to attack and swing around poles. That may seem like a lot, but each style keeps things relatively simple. No matter what the play you're in, the goal remains the same. Beat the baddies, save the actors, and make it to the end of the level. The different playstyles do a great job keeping the game fresh, and while I definitely prefer some over others, I think they're all fun in their own way. While exploring the levels, you can also collect Sparkle Gems. A lot of these you get just by running through the level, but there are a bunch that are hidden you'll need to find. They're really fun to collect, but unfortunately if you miss one, which is surprisingly easy to do, then you have to play through the entire level again to get it. This can sometimes make going for 100% a pain, especially in the mermaid levels, because there's a Sparkle Gem at the very end tied to a performance, and it's really easy to screw up. On top of the Sparkle Gems, you can also find one hidden dress ribbon in each level that lets you customize Peach's look. It doesn't add a ton, but it's a nice bit of charm. Speaking of which, this game is just oozing with charm. They really take the idea of the game being a bunch of plays and run wild with it. Structures and obstacles are often made of cardboard and such with visible bolts, certain enemies and objects are held by strings or made of wood, and you always start a level by entering stage left. I'd say this game puts on a wonderful performance, and I'd say go for it if you haven't already. Two years ago, I played through AI the Somnium Files. It was a super well crafted visual novel that kept me engaged the whole way through. Well, when I finished it, my buddy immediately showed me the trailer for the sequel that had just come out, and just like before, he gifted it to me as a holiday gift at the end of 2023. So let's talk about Nirvana Initiative. The structure of this game is pretty much exactly the same as the first game. You get areas you investigate to find clues, you talk to people to figure things out, and you prod brains to find out what people are hiding. However, there have been quite a few changes and additions. The big change is that there are two routes. You start off by playing the game as Ryuki, recounting events from 6 years prior, and then after a certain point, you pick up with Mizuki in the present day. This is honestly pretty cool, as this case is much more elaborate than the first games. There's also this new thing with a VR setting. This allows you to fully recreate a scenario that just happened to answer questions that seemingly cannot be answered. All this stuff is really cool, and the two route system definitely adds a lot more to the main conflict at hand. However, I think I like the first game more. I like the new additions and the ways to investigate, but I definitely enjoyed the story more in the first game. That doesn't take away from everything this game does, and if you played the first game and enjoyed it like I did, then you won't want to miss this one. Some consider video games to be their own art medium, and I feel that there's truth to that. Video games have seemingly endless ways of expressing themselves, and there truly is a video game for everyone out there. But what about a video game that is all about art? And I don't mean a drawing game or an art studio, I mean a game exploring what art can mean. Well, like I said, there's a game for everyone, and Chicory: A Colorful Tale certainly fits that bill. Talking about this game is pretty interesting, because what makes this game special isn't really the game itself. The gameplay mainly boils down to a fairly standard top-down adventure game, with the main gimmick being painting the environment in order to access new areas and solve puzzles. You can dive into the Paint Splatoon style to climb walls and such, go through tubes to different areas, and use paint to open doors or help mark the way. The gameplay itself is simple and fun, but that's not what makes this game special. Everything else really elevates this game, starting with the story. It starts off simple, with you trying to figure out what caused all the color in the world to disappear, but it gradually evolves into so much more. It becomes this gripping tale covering legit issues like depression and anxiety. You see these characters suffering from issues that you or someone you know also suffer from, and that helps you connect with a lot of them in a special way. What also helps is the charm surrounding the entire adventure. Every character in this game is an animal named after food. You get hints about what to do next by calling your mom on a random phone booth, and each area has its own distinct feel and is filled with people that have their own problems. This is a wonderful example of a game that's greater than the sum of its parts, and it's truly a work of art. It felt so good to finally play Banjo-Kazooie back in 2022. It was a game that I knew about for well over a decade prior, and playing it felt like fulfilling a long-made promise at last. After finishing it, I wondered if the sequel Banjo-Tooie would get a release on NSO2. So I waited, and finally 2 years later it happened. So now I get to talk about it. TTYD has a much different way of doing things. Sure, the basic idea is still there with you collecting music notes and jiggies just like the first game, but there's quite a bit more at play here. First off, the hub is way bigger in scope. Gruntilda's lair in the first game felt a lot like Peach's castle from Mario 64. Sure, there was stuff to see and explore, but it felt fairly confined and funneled you into the areas you needed to get to comfortably. TTYD's hub world feels a lot more like Spyro the Dragons. It's way bigger and there's a ton more to do. Some might say it overcomplicates things, but I don't agree. Sure, having to do things like go to Honeybee for health extensions is a bit inconvenient, but it really helps with the world building. Plus, there are a ton of these tunnel points that let you easily jump from one area of the world to another, which makes getting around easy. Notes and jiggies are also handled much differently here. Notes now give you access to new abilities, courtesy of Bowles' army sergeant brother, Jam Jars. These abilities are honestly super cool because on top of the full moveset from the first game, you gain access to new ways to attack, as well as being able to split up Banjo-Kazooie and have their own moves. Jiggies also open the way to new levels, but you have to bring them to Jiggy Wiggy, that name is amazing, and do a little puzzle minigame to open the world. It's honestly pretty fun, and since you don't need notes to progress, you can easily open multiple worlds at a time, letting you tackle them in any order you want. Speaking of the worlds, they're a lot bigger in this game, which is both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, there's a lot more to do and see, but on the other hand, there is a lot of backtracking involved. It's basically impossible to fully complete any world on your first visit because you need later abilities to get jiggies you can't obtain yet. This isn't a huge deal for a casual run, but for a completionist like myself, it can get annoying at times. Despite that downside, I actually ended up enjoying TTYD more than Kazooie. Sure, there are some irksome parts, but the new additions are great and the huge worlds are so much fun to explore. It's basically how I feel about Pikmin 1 and 2. The first game is a nice, brisk adventure that's easy to revisit, while the second game is a fuller experience and a lot more fun to see through to the end. I'd say the Baron Bird made the sequel jump and stuck the landing. It's no secret that I adore Mario Party. That series is so much fun to play with friends and leads to so many laughs throughout. Back in 2021, we were graced with Mario Party Superstars, a wonderful return to form for the series. Afterwards, everyone wondered what could be next. A lot of people expected DLC for Superstars, and I was among them. But then a trailer for Super Mario Party Jamboree dropped in a Nintendo Direct. That was a great day for me. The first completely original Mario Party game since Super came out in 2018, and it looked fantastic. And yeah, it's pretty awesome. The new boards are super fun to play on and have gimmicks that feel very original, such as the rising and falling tide of Goomba Lagoon or the shop focus of Rainbow Galleria. Heck, they even brought back Mario's Rainbow Castle in Western Land, and seeing them in a modern style is awesome. And on top of that, the minigame lineup is honestly one of the best in the series. Almost all the minigames are just a blast to play and fun to compete in. Sure, there are some duds, but a majority are great. There's also an iteration of the partner system seen in Super. Occasionally, you'll see other characters land on the board, and whenever someone gets to one, it initiates a showdown minigame. Whoever wins that minigame gets the character and their associated bonus. On top of that, almost every action is performed twice, which really adds up. But be careful, because if someone passes you, they'll steal your ally. And there's even more to see beyond the standard board game. First, there's the Pro rule set, which changes a lot. There's one bonus star everyone knows at the start, the game is always 12 turns, everyone gets an item at the start, shops have limited inventory, and minigames have you choose from a batch of 4 to be chosen. It's alright, something I enjoy doing once in a while, but definitely not as fun as the normal rules. There's also a pretty interesting single player mode. You go around the boards to help them set up for parties. You compete in minigames to solve issues, find items and deliver them to other characters, and all these actions give you mini stars. And after you get enough, you fight a boss and move on to the next board. It's short and sweet, and it's pretty fun. And with the addition of some great side modes such as Rhythm Kitchen, Koopathlon, Bowser's Kaboom Squad, and more, this is a game that seems just about endless in its replay value. Come on down, and let's party! We all know that Princess Peach originally was a do-nothing damsel that eventually became so much more than that. But the other Nintendo's big princesses, Zelda, didn't get the same treatment. Outside of a couple of games, she was mainly just a plot point or a means to an end. However, that trend was bucked last year, and just like Peach, Zelda finally got her own game. The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. Removing the oddity of playing a Zelda game where you actually play as Zelda, this is actually a very unique game to talk about. On the surface, it's the typical top-down Zelda game, but there's so much more to it. Naturally, Zelda doesn't have a sword or anything combat-related, so what does she do? Well, with the help of a new spirit companion Tri, she can make duplicates of whatever she comes across. Tables, rocks, pots, even enemies. This one mechanic drastically changes how you approach this game. Because everything that isn't a piece of terrain can be summoned at will, there's basically an infinite amount of ways to handle a problem ahead of you. In combination with Tri's ability to move objects and enemies around, there's basically nothing stopping you from using anything around you to solve a problem. You can use objects as staircases, summon objects to throw at enemies, or even summon enemies to do the fighting for you. And when you transition to dungeons, they really reward your creativity. Sure, there are often simple solutions to puzzles involving the right echoes, but if you're clever enough, you can find your own solutions. And then there's the matter of the Link form. See, Link is out of commission for basically the entire game, but after defeating an echo of him, you gain the ability to become Link temporarily. This lets you mow down enemies, and while it is nice, it ultimately makes combat pretty samey. That one blemish aside, I adored this game wholeheartedly, and that is no illusion whatsoever. So here's something about me. I enjoy it when a video game is just really, really stupid. It could be through its writing, locations, or gameplay, it doesn't matter. If it's stupid in some way, then I will most likely adore it. And I finally got to play the epitome of stupid fun last year. Sunset Overdrive. I got this game as a gift from my friend a few years ago, but unfortunately, my laptop at the time couldn't run it well at all. Fortunately, after I moved, I got myself a proper PC and got to enjoy this stupid masterpiece. The premise is really simple. There's a brand new energy drink, and suddenly the apocalypse happens. I am not sugarcoating that, by the way. The game goes from a huge party to running for your life in no time flat. Is this jarring? Probably a bit. Is this amazing? You know it! The fact that the plot wastes no time getting going means I can focus on the smoothest butter gameplay. The best way I can describe it is if Saints Row 4 and Ratchet & Clank had a baby. You have this massive overworld to explore however you want, and a movement system that encourages you to never stop. You can grind on just about anything, bounce high, run on walls, and swing on poles to get wherever you need to go. And then there's the weaponry you get to use. Insomniac loves making stupid weapon designs in the best way possible, and they absolutely brought their A game here. These weapons are usually just manufactured from whatever you might find in the apocalypse, but they're all really effective against the hordes of enemies you fight. And in typical Insomniac fashion, using your weapons enough levels them up to make them even better. And as you're doing all that moving and shooting, you're upping your style gauge. As this gauge fills, you get to use your amps, which just let you unleash your own apocalypse on whatever is in front of you. The way you're actively encouraged to gain style and keep it high means there's absolutely never a dull moment in this game. And tying it all together is the writing. They put so much heart and soul into every character interaction and made the script without a single care for the fourth wall, and it's also stupid and I love it. Seriously, this is the kind of stupid game that all others of its kind should be compared to. So come on down and fight the apocalypse! Indie games are often greater than the sum of their parts. A lot of the time, their gameplay can be pretty simple, but they have a ton of added flair throughout that truly elevates them and makes them worth talking about just as much, if not more, than the big releases. Last year, there was a truly special indie game release, and I'm so glad I got to play it. Let's talk about the Plucky Squire. On the surface, this seems like a Zelda-inspired game with a storybook aesthetic, and that got me interested. This kind of look for an indie game is fairly unexplored and adds so much charm. And the way the narrator reads off passages in the cutscenes truly makes it feel like a child reading a book or a parent reading it to them, and that's really cute. The beginning portion has some pretty standard combat and puzzles, and you meet your friends in this really charming world. However, it doesn't take long for this game to show its true colors. Pretty early on, you see the villain in this book deviate from the script. He knows he's just a character in a book and destined to fail and wants to change it, so he just yeets the protagonist out of the book. This storybook game has a freaking meta-narrative. I don't know who in the world came up with this idea, but this is absolutely genius! They use the idea of a children's storybook not only as a literary device, but as an allegory for inspiration. And it's true, a lot of projects, including indie games, are inspired by what the developers loved when they were younger. Good stories go on to inspire many, while bad stories are left on the bookshelf to be forgotten and gather dust. And the way the gameplay takes advantage of this idea is also brilliant! Outside the book, you have these 3D platformer sections to find important items, and the room around you changes every time you do so. What's more, you can directly manipulate the book from the outside, which causes a whole host of effects to deal with the problems ahead. This leads to truly inventive puzzles that really force you to think outside the box in order to proceed. This has easily become a top indie game for me, and if you haven't tried it yet, then open the book and savor the adventure. You guys know I've been a big fan of Overwatch for a really long time. Ever since I first played the game back in 2016, it's been a game I've sunk a ridiculous amount of time into. And last year, a game dropped that's very similar, and I'm sure it needs no introduction. Of course, it's Marvel Rivals. This is definitely Marvel's take on a hero shooter, and it's really fun. A lot of people have been saying that this game is basically what Overwatch was than back in the day, and this game is gonna kill Overwatch! Overwatch is gonna die! Ugh! Here's the thing. Aside from being hero shooters with similar mechanics, these two games are entirely their own thing, even on the basic level. Overwatch is 5v5 with rolelock as a standard. This means that teams will always be balanced with 1 tank, 2 damage, and 2 healers. What this means is that the team that wins is often the one with the more innate synergy, and the one that uses their hero's traits for the objective better. Marvel Rivals, meanwhile, is 6v6 with no rolelock, as well as special team-up perks. This means that teams in this game have to work harder to synergize and worry more about their overall team composition. I think this works to the benefit of both games and helps them stay distinct. It also helps that the hero design is pretty different in each game. Sure, there are some you can make comparisons between, but they're all different in their own way. But that's enough talk about that. Let's go into what else Marvel Rivals does. Right off the bat, there are a lot of characters to choose from. The game launched with 33 characters, and there are going to be more added every couple of months or so. Sure, it may seem like a lot to consider and remember, but a lot of kits are kept simple for the most part. Sure, some characters are more technical than others, but there are plenty that you'll immediately be able to get a grasp on. As of right now, I'd say I'm a proud Cloak and Dagger main. I adore how the light and darkness attributes of their kit play off one another, and it's super satisfying to nail the execution to win a team fight. I'm also a fan of Star-Lord for his movement capabilities and how much fun it is to gun down opponents' Tracer style, and Groot, who has a great tank feel with his ability to wall off enemies for a brawl. I do enjoy most of the lineup overall, and I'm excited for what's to come. Something else unique is destructible terrain. With a push of a button, you can see what walls and such can be destroyed, and this opens up new avenues for offense and defense. If there's any issues I have with the game, it's the map lineup. As of right now, there are only 9 maps and 3 game modes in the game. This can be annoying when I queue up for multiple games and get stuck with the same map repeatedly. It would also be nice if there were some arcade modes with different feels from the standard. There are occasional event modes which are fun for sure, but I wish there was something that stuck around besides deathmatch. That's something that will definitely be improved over time, but it's still a bummer. I'd say I enjoy this game just as much as I do Overwatch, and playing both keeps me from getting burned out on either. Choose your hero, and I'll see you on the battlefield. Do you guys have that game where a lot of people say it's alright, but you find it way better than that? I found one last year. I ended up playing 2 Tales games courtesy of PS Plus, Tales of Zestiria and Tales of Arise. Now I know what you might expect. You think I'll talk about Arise this high on the list with how great its gameplay and production values are. However, I enjoyed Zestiria a whole lot more. Yeah, Arise is good, but Zestiria goes way beyond good, and it honestly baffles me how this game isn't talked about more. My friends who are also super into this series say it's not one of the better ones in this series, but it places very high for me. The story is about this guy named Saray. He lives in a secluded area full of ruins and is absolutely fascinated by ruins in history. Honestly, I could connect with Saray on a ton of levels, as he and I share a lot of traits. He's a complete nerd with a heart of gold that will do anything in his power to help anyone in need. This comes to a head when Malevolence strikes, and he pulls a special sword to take up the role as Shepherd. Throughout the game, he goes across the land to not only purge Malevolence, but also save those in need. Saray is a wonderful protagonist, and this extends to the cast as a whole. This has to be my favorite cast of characters in the series yet. You got the brother figure Mikleo, the adorable Lila, the determined Aisha, the stoic Edna, the sharp-witted Rose, and the mysterious and cool Dezel. The entire cast kept me engaged the whole time, and the combat doesn't slack either. This game has a pretty unique system where arts are split into 3 categories. You have martial arts, which are fast, hidden arts, which have some wind-up but are stronger, and seraphic arts, which are your spells. What makes this work is the rock, paper, scissors dynamic these arts have. Martial arts cannot stagger someone using hidden arts accelerate the charge of seraphic arts, but martial arts can break seraphic arts before they're used. And since each character has 2 of these 3 art types, there's a lot of strategy to use on the battlefield, as you need to react to what kind of fighter the enemy is and change your approach accordingly. There are also the titles you can equip to your party to augment their stats as well as give them bonus traits. These titles can also improve and dictate what arts you learn, so there's a bunch of ways to progress. There's also a really cool skill system. Each piece of gear has specific traits on it, and by stacking these traits together correctly, you can access a whole host of unique benefits. This adds a ton of strategy to what to equip, as simply the strongest piece might not be the best. Adding on to this is the amortization mechanic. Human characters can merge with Seraph allies to become stronger and give their attacks element properties. While a lot of people say that this is a brain-dead win button, I totally disagree. Because in this state you have no martial arts, you're much weaker against spellcasters. What's more, all Seraphic allies have healing arts in some capacity, so using the system means you'll have to burn items to heal or expend your limited blast gauge to do so. This game shot up to 3rd place in my rankings, just behind Xillia 2 and Abyss, and if you haven't given it a try yet, I urge you to give it a go. See how this tale unfolds for yourself. I've gone on record saying that Hades is a top-tier indie game. As both a roguelike and an indie game, it aces every category, and I adore it so much. So you can probably imagine the hype I had when a sequel was announced. It looks to be more of the same, but with a new spin. And yeah, I want to start gushing about it. While Hades 2 is still in early access at this time, it has just about everything barring one major story bite, so I can confidently include it here. Plus, it's my video. Who's gonna stop me? You? Good luck with that. Anyways, Hades 2 does follow a similar formula to the first game. You pick your weapon and your selection of skills and just go for it, getting help from the Olympian gods on your quest to kill Kronos, the Titan of Time. So what exactly does the sequel do differently? Well, for one, the weapon selection is very different. You start off with a staff and eventually gain access to things like twin blades, a skull bomb, and a jetpack and gauntlets. Are you kidding me? I don't know where in Greek mythology the black cloak came from, but it's really cool, so I'm not in a position to complain. Mel also has a few tricks of her own up her sleeve. She can charge any weapon to perform an Omega attack at the cost of her magic gauge, and also cast a spell to slow or mobilize enemies, which can also be Omega charged. The skill system is also handled a lot differently, with the brand new Arcana card system. You can equip skills based on your grass stat, and certain cards can only be activated under the right conditions. I think this is a great improvement, as it allows for a lot more versatility. The biggest addition in the game, though, is the surface. See, in Hades 1, you went through the same route every time. In this game, you not only have the underworld to traverse, but also the surface. And there are new enemies, bosses, and obstacles to encounter. Overall, I do think Hades 1 is better, but don't get the wrong idea here. Hades 2 is still phenomenal all the same, and just like its predecessor, it's a hell of a good time. It feels so good to be a fan of Mario RPGs right now. Mario RPGs have gone from dead to flourishing without any real in-between over the last couple of years. The Super Mario RPG remake in 2023 was the start, and that year, we were also shown a trailer for a remake of Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door. And my only response is this: I love the Switch so much. Thousand Year Door is a game beloved by many, myself included, and now it's fully available for everyone with a Nintendo Switch, which has become one of the best-selling consoles ever. And man, this remake absolutely does the original justice and then some. At its core, it is mostly the same game. The gameplay in and of itself hasn't changed one bit, and that is 100% a compliment. Thousand Year Door was already one of the most fun RPGs ever made, and this remake adds a ton of small tweaks and quality of life improvements. First off, the presentation got a massive facelift. The original game still looks great today, but the additional lighting and details on the environments really helps them flourish a lot more. Also, characters are a whole lot more expressive, with new sprites to convey emotions in scenes, which is a great thing to see. And man oh man, the soundtrack! The original game already has a phenomenal OST, but this remake gives it a nice remix, and while they're not all better to me, it's still awesome to see. What's more, there's even the option to switch to the original soundtrack if you desire. This should be a standard for all remakes. But the best thing the remake adds is the quality of life improvements. Specifically, they cut down on a lot of the backtracking. Holy cow, you would not believe how elated I was to see that pipe in Chapter 4. They cut the backtracking in that chapter clean in half and made it go from annoying to actually solid. And there's a ton of other little stuff in that vein. Add on some additional content that I won't spoil here, and you have easily one of the best RPGs available on Switch. No contest. The only reason it's not number 1 is that the base game was already fantastic, and this merely elevates it a little bit. My number 1, on the other hand, it's truly special. I've been a super big fan of the Mario & Luigi series since I was a little boy playing on my GBA. I remember so fondly playing Superstar Saga and loving just about everything about it. And over the years, I played all the games and loved them too. However, back in 2019, shortly after the Bowser's Inside Story remake flopped, Alpha Dream unfortunately filed for bankruptcy. I firmly believe that this RPG series I held near and dear to my heart would never see a new game again. Isn't it wonderful to be wrong sometimes? Seriously, when that random Nintendo Direct opened with a trailer for Mario & Luigi Brothership, that right there put me in the best mood possible. Nintendo did what was thought to be impossible and brought back the series with a brand new game. I waited and waited to finally get my hands on it, and I was the happiest human being on the planet when I finally got to start playing. What starts as a normal day in the Mushroom Kingdom, complete with Luigi abuse, quickly turns into an otherworldly adventure as everyone is transported to Concordia. The land has been broken apart, and only Mario and Luigi, alongside their new friends and Connie and Snoutlet, can bring it all back. It's a simple story for sure, but that's how it's always been. What carries it is the charm and the writing. There are themes of connections throughout, which feeds back perfectly into the conflict, and seeing everyone that were once so far away brought back together is always such a wonderful feeling. On top of that, the humor is simply top-notch. From your allies, random NPCs, and the enemies that try and stop you along the way, it kept a smile on my face the whole time. Structurally, things do take a different turn from other games in the series. Since Concordia is broken apart, you have to go to each island and get to the lighthouse to connect it to your ship, aptly named Ship Shape Island. Each of these islands sort of go for a feel of a traditional Mario level, with platforming challenges as well as conflicts you have to help resolve. And of course, there are enemies to fight too. And man, the combat in this game might just be the best combat in this series yet. Mario and Luigi not only pair up for their basic jump and hammer attacks, but each of them gets their own lineup of bros attacks to use. Adding on to this is the Battle Plug system. This is similar to the badges or battle cards from Inside Story onward, but I honestly like how they're handled here a bit more. Instead of building up to powerful effects you can activate at your leisure, these instead provide passive benefits. Whether they be additional perks to your attacks, defensive traits, something item related, and loads more. What's more, you can combine specific perks for even greater effects, really encouraging you to make the most out of this system. And when it all comes together, especially against the bosses, it is just pure RPG bliss. And man, I just adore what they did with Luigi in this game. The way he becomes the idea man in traversal and boss fights makes me love him all the more. Sure, the beginning of this game can be a bit long and slow, but if you can overcome that one hurdle, you'll find a truly special and exceptional game that is truly worthy of the Mario & Luigi moniker. I waited 5 years for this moment, and Mario & Luigi Brothership is hands down my favorite game of 2024. I'm Arrow Dragon, and it's time to set sail towards a bright new year. And that wraps up my first major project of 2025, and I hope you all enjoyed it. I'm sorry I couldn't get this done sooner, but life got hectic for me at the start of the year. As for what's coming next, I think with the Switch 2 on the horizon, that's a great time to talk about my favorite games for the Nintendo Switch. Also remember to follow my Twitch and check out my Discord if you haven't already. Well, until next time, this is Zero Dragon, signing off.